and nothing to read, and I'm looking around, and I look over, and there on my side table is an English interpretation of the Holy Qur'an. So I pick it up and think, why not? I'll read a few pages, I'll get bored, I'll put it down. I pick it up, I turn to the first surah, and I'm just reading it out of academic curiosity. It's obviously a hymn of praise. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise be to God, ruler of all worlds, master of the day of judgment. And I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, oh, a hymn of praise, a psalm. Then I get to the end of it, and then as I get to the end of it, I realize, oh, the last few lines slipped into, made a subtle transition into a prayer for guidance. Show us the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored, not those who have gone astray, or upon whom is violence or wrath. And I thought, what a clever author. You know, he tricked me into making a prayer for guidance, a supplication for guidance. Clever man. So I assume the Qur'an had a human author. So I turn to the next surah, and it begins Alif, Lam, Mim, 3 Arabic letters. Then that is the book, wherein no doubt is the guidance for those who are on their toes or vigilant. So I read it and I look at it and say, so are you talking to me? Are you saying that this prayer for guidance that I just inadvertently made, you're now saying that this is the guidance that I was seeking? And I look at the opening line and it says, that is the book. And I thought, the author has a very interesting style. See, from this point in the Quran, the beginning of the second surah, from here on out, the perspective is God addressing the reader, God speaking to the reader. I always thought, you know, scripture should be like the ones I was exposed to. Stories, ancient history, a biography of a prophet or something. This is direct, God talking to the reader, addressing the reader. I thought, now the author of this book definitely was original. He actually wrote a revelation from God to humanity. But not only that, he has a very engaging style. He gets you to ask questions, and then gives answers, and then creates more questions. Somehow, this Quran, he wrote it in a style that gets you into a dialogue with the scripture. Like that just brief dialogue I just mentioned. I had that experience repeatedly as I read through the Quran. This dialogue, I'd find myself drawn in. I'd ask a question. A few lines later, sometimes a couple passages later, maybe I would see an answer. And then I would create another question. And then I was involved in this veritable dialogue with the scripture. And then I come, of course, to the famous allegory, what you would expect after you get through an introduction. The Quran is going to talk about human beings and their origin and what their life is all about, in the famous allegory of the first man and first woman. So that begins in the 30th verse of the second surah. And it begins, behold, your Lord said to the angels. So we're about to hear a heavenly announcement, a great moment. Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to put a vicegerent of mine on earth, a viceroy, an emissary, a representative of mine. This is a noble election. God is about to create man and assign him a noble role. I immediately said to myself, no, he obviously got the story all wrong. Man is not put on earth to fill some noble role. He's put on earth as a punishment. Because that's, in my religious tradition, the one of my birth, the one I abandoned, and I'm not putting it down, but that's the way the story is told. And I felt the author got confused when he was, repeating the story. And then the angel said, will you put therein one who will spread corruption and shed much blood, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? Glorify your holy name? And I read that verse, and I just stared at it. I was captivated. I was angry. I could feel the heat rising inside me. Because look what it says. Will you put therein one God says, I'm going to assign these humans this noble role. And then the angels say, are you going to create this being who spreads corruption and sheds much blood? This most criminal, violent, destructive creature? And put him on earth in this role? When you could create us? As they plainly say, well, we celebrate your praises and glorify you? How could you create this and assign him that role when we are clearly more deserving and more appropriate? Are you following me? And that was my question. That was my life. That was my childhood. All of it just encapsulated in those 15 words. And I was shocked. I thought the author is committing theological suicide. You don't ask the most poignant question in the history of man's theological reflections. A question for which there is no rational answer. In the beginning of the story of the first man and woman. At least wait to the end of the scripture. But don't put it from the start. I had to find out how he answered the question. As disturbing as I thought the question was, how it brought back all my childhood, I had to find out. And so I was hooked. I wanted to see how the author answered that question. So I began reading through the Qur'an. And I immediately got some hints, but it didn't fill in the picture. So I kept reading and reading and reading. By the time I had finished the Qur'an, all the arguments I had against the existence of God, all the premises I had built against his existence, one by one, I saw them falling apart. So by the time I finished the Qur'an, I had no more argument against the existence of God.